So everyone will know either myself or Porrig, but of course my name's Sarah Turner and I'm the Managing Director of TTI Success Insights in the UK. And then we have, of course, Porrig, who is the CEO of TTI Success Insights in Ireland. And Porrig and myself have been running these masterclasses for our networks since the beginning of Q2 of this year, and they've been really well received and really well attended, and people have been really kind in sending their feedback. We always like to start these masterclasses with doing a little bit of why, a little bit of the why should we do it. And this is probably definitely preaching to the converted here, because we know why it's important to build teams, hence why we're running the team building sessions. But I think sometimes it's just really good to have these bits of information and these statistics as well, so you can drop them into your own presentations. So why build teams? Increase productivity and resource utilization. I really like this statistic. Highly engaged teams show 21% greater profitability. That's a statistic by Gallup. And then higher motivation and engagement. So organizations with engaged employees outperform those by 202%. Another great statistic there for you if you need them, by Gallup. Better problem solving and also better resilience and adaptivity. And when it comes to using assessments in this manner for team building, today we're going to be talking about using behaviours and driving forces as the underpinning sciences for the team building session. But I'm really passionate. I feel really passionate about the fact that what assessments bring to particularly behaviours and driving forces, what they bring to a team building session is this promotion of the uniqueness that each of us bring, and so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, there's a slight tilt on that. It's a different angle, but it definitely helps. And the reason for that is because, as we know, there's no right and there's no wrong, and that's what makes the using this so great. Nobody should be striving to have a particular behavior or a particular driving force over another one. It's all about understanding what makes us unique, and then harnessing that and allowing people that uniqueness to shine in people. And of course, there are some behavioral styles and some driving forces that are helpful in terms of a fit, but there's nobody should be saying, "Oh, I wish I was a bit more," or I'm being people within the organization are being championed for having this. Sometimes you'll see people where high D behavior, for example, is like a badge of honor. When you go in, I'm sure you've all seen this as well. I'm sure you've all experienced this, where people are almost sort of proud of that, and an element of behavioral bias comes in there as well. But it's all about appreciating the uniqueness that people bring, and that really, really helps with people feeling included and with psychological safety, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But I think the reason that it's so important to touch on that is that in your joining instructions, right from the word go, you really need to hammer that home. You've got to have that theme there. It helps people to feel more comfortable. It helps people to feel less nervous when they're attending a session. To understand that this isn't a banana skin exercise. You're not gonna be sort of saying, "Oh, that's a developmental area for you." When it comes to your behavior, it helps people feel more comfortable, less nervous. So I'm going to, as I say, take you through the program itself, with behaviors and also driving forces, but just a real quick program outline. I've split it up into 2 days, and I just wanted to say in advance that there is a lot of content, and you might look at this and think, I would want to add a day to that, and that's fine. You've got to almost see this as a modular approach, and Porrig will definitely testify to that as well. It totally depends on the kind of team you're working with too, and how long they've been together as a team, and what kind of sort of level they're at. in terms of how much you need time wise, we often get people sort of say, oh, can we do a really quick half day with behaviors and driving forces? And you can't get underneath it, both sciences in half a day. So as you're going through, if you're thinking, I think I'd want to add a bit more time to that, I agree with you, and that's fine. For the sake of the session today, I've split it up into 2 days. So day one, and this would be how I would potentially run it, but I would add that caveat of people may need a little bit more time, and that's something that's a bit of a judgment call. So day one, obviously introductions, understanding team dynamics, and then exploring behaviors. So introductions, understanding all about teams and why we want teams to work well together and some of the components of that, and then exploring DISC and behaviors. Then day two, we're looking at driving forces in particular, and then the what next. So then it's all about the application of those two sciences and an action plan of what next. And then we're going to talk about prep and post session a bit later on, because there are some key tips that I've got that I wanted to share with you, and Padraig will definitely have some as well that he'll want to add in, I'm sure. So, of course, first element to this, welcome and your housekeeping, whatever it is that you've got to say. We always like to, I'm going to come out of presenter mode, by the way, here, so you can see the notes as well, and you can see what's available for you to look at. So rules of engagement and today's objective. We always like to start with that, any key things that you want to say, encouraging people to participate. That's, again, an opportunity for you to really hit home about the fact that nothing's good and nothing's bad. Just try and make people feel really relaxed. But essentially, it's to create a supportive and engaging atmosphere, encourage participation, active listening. You can talk a little bit about what that looks like. There's going to be quite a lot of group work in this session. So you can, if you want to, you can encourage people to, for example, have a different presenter each time. Sometimes that happens. People just say, oh, you're good at talking. You do the presenting back to the group, and, that might not be how you want to structure things. So that's your opportunity to set those rules of engagement. And then just a little icebreaker. Now, I really like saying, tell me about a hobby or a passion you have that you can talk about for hours. And the reason this works really well is that later in the program, you'll see in the notes here, I've put later in the program, you'll probably be able to find some links between a person's hobby and passion that they could talk about for hours and their driving forces. So you'll be able to link that back a bit later in the day. So I think that's a really good one. Or you could use, if you could invite any celebrity, living or dead, to a dinner party, who would it be? And again, there might be some ties back there to behaviors. We seem to like, or we're attracted to people who have similar behaviors to us. So there'll be opportunities then for you to tie that in later on. Next bit, we're all about understanding team dynamics. So in groups, we want to talk about how does effective teamwork impact a team. So we want to get them thinking about how working together really well as a team impacts them personally, the team, and then wider holistic view of the organization. If you want to, you can add a little bit in there around, additionally, how does great teamwork help achieve the company's mission statement or vision? If the organization that you're working with are very sort of good at communicating that mission statement and vision of the organization through to people, then I think that's a really nice tie. How does us working really well together as a team support that and complement that? Another thing that I think works really well is if you can have some sort of statement from someone in the senior leadership team, someone in the SLT, about how the session that they're part of, really helps the organization from their point of view. I really like that. A couple of our clients have done that, and it seems to have worked really, really well. Obviously, people in the SLT are more accessible in some organizations than others. So, if you can, I think that's a really great thing to include in there. And then you can incorporate other models if you want to here, but I really like talking to people about Tuckman stages of team development. This is something that we've talked about for quite a few years now, and the idea of this is that you'll see that the words are in different colours. You can find out lots more about this online, just do a quick search, but essentially it's talking about the different stages their team goes through. There's the forming stage at the beginning, which is that initial stage where the team members meet each other for that first time, and start to get to know one another. And at this point, everyone's, polite and working, courteously. And there's perhaps a lot of behavioral adaptation going on, especially if the team's got quite a lot of emotional intelligence. The next stage is storming. This is where people start settling into that team. They start to express their own opinions and ideas. We might start seeing some driving forces coming out in people, and we might start seeing some conflicts emerges as everyone kind of establishes the roles and the positions within the team. Then we've got norming, and this is where, as you can see here, we're starting to venture into the green element. And the team that you're working with might be at the forming stage. It's great if they are, and that's the reason you're in there. Or they might be at that storming stage. Usually we've found that people kind of get you involved at this kind of stage because there's the need for you to be there. So this is where they start to work together more effectively. They they begin to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they start to develop trust and respect for each other. So this team building session, the session that you're running, really contributes towards that stage actually happening in the first place. The next bit is performing. So this is where they're functioning really well as a team, working together effectively and achieving their goals together. And then actually this final stage was added on at a later date. And this is adjourning. So of course, in linear teams and things that are working on specific projects, this is the final stage where you kind of disband. But also and I've put a note in here in the notes for the trainer to look at. It's really important to note that teams go through these stages, not necessarily in this linear fashion, and some of them might skip certain ones altogether. But just understanding the stages and understanding Tuckman stages sort of can help the teams identify whereabouts they think they are. Also, I think there's an element of making them think, okay, it's not just us. That if there is quite a lot of conflict going on, and they can work through those problems sort of more effectively. So I like to do that. I think it adds credibility as well to your program and to what you're saying. Then, so they have that group, the group discussion. You can have that as an open conversation. You could make that into a bit of a workshop if you've got time. Or you could just literally take them through those stages. It's totally up to you. I think this bit is quite easily bespoked by you, really, and what you think you want to achieve. If you want to stretch things out, you might want to make that into more of a workshop. So then when you get into the behaviors element, straight away, I love this slide, and the reason I love it is I think it's really punchy and it just calms people down immediately, and explains the context of what behaviors are. The fact that they're only the doorway to communication, the fact that it's all about win-win, the uniqueness of people extends far beyond the DISC model, and we don't call them personality tests for that reason. This is just surface level, the how. That's all it's telling us when it comes to behaviors. This doesn't define your personality, at all. There's no such thing as good and bad. Everyone has the potential to be a winner. One behavioral designer is not necessarily a better leader than another. It depends on lots of different factors in that. The behavioral design is that combination of all four factors. You've got over 50,000 different combinations. So I really, that bit in particular makes people feel that the assessment that you're using isn't, just some Facebook quiz, or a horoscope type thing that's got no substance, when they understand there's 50,000 different combinations. And if you want to, you can also add in a little bit of the reliability and validity element in here. So if you want to go down that road, you can talk about the fact that the tools, the assessment itself, questionnaire is validated by the EEG brain images if you want to. But it again just adds credibility to the instrument that you're going to be using to underpin what you're doing. And then this final one is the one that really hits home the most. And that's that every person has the ability to adapt to any behavioral profile. So really, really drive home that this isn't about suitability or your fit within the team, because we can all adapt to anywhere. But we acknowledge that that does require increased energy, and how long you can do that for is unique and different for everybody. But what this does for you is tells you what your natural tendencies are and gives you that knowledge to consciously adapt. So, and you'll talk about energy shortly, but again, genuinely, when you're running this and you go through all of those elements, and people start to really understand the context of this, you can visibly see people's shoulders just start to loosen up and go down. So it's really important that you put that in right at the beginning. It just makes people feel far more relaxed. When to use a behavioral model. So, just talk about the fact that it's just about commitment and cooperation. It helps with building teams. And that just drives home the point about it being surface level and just about how this isn't a read off of your personality. So then we go into the 4 behaviors, and we talk about, D is how we handle problems and challenges. And if I could give you one tip, it would be to constantly refer back to this slide. And Padraig will hopefully agree with me. But the reason I say that is because when people start seeing those descriptors, sometimes people can get really tripped up with the words, and especially I find the ones that don't apply to them. So I'll give you an example. When it comes to the D scale, one of the words is ambitious. And if you're a really driven person, and career driven, and you're reading that and the word ambitious is not highlighted for you, you could potentially think, oh gosh, this is saying I'm not ambitious, but I'm probably the most ambitious person I would know, and everyone around me, thinks I'm super, super ambitious. It's not a descriptor of your personality. It's how you handle problems and challenges. So we're saying that when you're faced with a problem or a challenge, you don't handle that in an ambitious way. No, I don't. I'm really strategic. I think about things. I gather data before I make a decision. Okay, so that's the difference between that. So always pull people back to what essentially every single behavior on those scales are measuring, and give it that context, and that will really help. Especially if you're doing this session with a large group. That's really important, because you might not necessarily get as much one-to-one time with them during this session as somebody else. So really pull them back to this slide: how we respond to problems and challenges, how we handle people and influence others, how we handle change and pace ourselves, how we handle rules and procedures set by others. That would be my number 1 tip for you. So then we get into the detail of what they all mean. So you'll notice that on every single one of these slides, we've got this as a kind of an additional note on the side. So remember that we're talking about problems and challenges. So if you're above the line on D, and I think it's really important, because when you guys have all gone through the accreditation process, you're looking at these words and you've probably got them memorized to a degree. And same for Padraig and I, if we see a DISC profile, we understand what it means if you're at 65. But when you're introducing this to a team, and you're not taking them through an accreditation process, so we find that having this cue here, if you're above the line, this means that you prefer to take on problems and challenges quickly and directly. If you're below the line, this means that you prefer to take on problems and challenges cautiously and carefully. If that's the only thing that they sort of remember from that's great. You don't need to strive to make sure that everyone's got every single word on here, because I think that's unrealistic with the time that we've got. So, and this drives people back, it brings people back to problems and challenges, and just keeps that fresh in their mind, especially as they're looking at these words, for example, pioneering and ambitious, as I've just said, that's relating to problems and challenges. So take them through that, give them an understanding of that. If you want to, if you've got time, you can add an exercise in here where you ask a group to think about celebrities or famous people that they recognize as having those particular behaviors. Same for influence, same for steadiness, same for compliance. So take them through that. Then natural and adapted, again, it's difficult because you could probably have a day to just talk about natural and adaptive behavior, especially when you start getting into the belief system and all of that stuff. But literally, this would be the information that we would give to them. to individuals about what that's looking at. So tell them about natural behavior, tell them about adaptive behavior. And then talk to them about energy and about adaptation. How much energy does it take when you adapt your behavior? That's really, really, just from a personal development perspective, it's so important that they have that recognition, that understanding of how it works. And you'll remember, we use the phone analogy about how you start your day with 100%, and as you go through, you use different apps and different tasks throughout the day, takes away from that battery, and then when you get to 0, it switches off, and that's when you revert to your natural style. So just take them through that as well, that exercise too. And then at this stage, this is when we would then move to talking about the wheel, and you've really got to introduce the wheel and explain how it all works. The fact that outside ring is almost like a magnetic ring, and the circle representing your natural and the star representing your adapted, whereabouts you would be plotted. But again, don't let people get too hung up on needing to know exactly which box their behavior would be in. It's an approximation of their behavior, as we know. So, and it's all about allowing us to see patterns in teams. So introduce the wheel, take them through that. So then they receive their profile. Now, some people like for people to have received their profile ahead of time, and so that they have the opportunity to go through it. And some people really feel passionately that they receive it there and then, so that it's a controlled environment and they've got the opportunity to ask questions. It would be a little bit boring at this point, and it would be a waste of time if they received their profile and you just watch them go through their whole report. There's this, if you're using the management staff one, for example, there's 20, 25, 24 pages in there. So, it'd be pretty boring just to watch them rifle through. So that's a great opportunity for follow-up, that they can go away and actually read this. You can set some tasks for them to read a different page every week, or, whatever it might be. But in the session, we would say, have a read through the general characteristics, the behavioral characteristics, and we do the true false edit methodology. Underline anything that you do agree with, put some sort of marker next to things that you don't agree with. And if you don't, how would you edit that statement to make it true for you? And really, it's really important that they accept and that they feel comfortable with their report and what it's saying, because this is underpinning the whole session. So if they don't agree with it or they feel uncomfortable with it, you need to know, so that you can have a conversation with them and help them with that. Otherwise, everything you do from there on is not necessarily going to land. The self-awareness part of this is super important. So they can do that. Then we just say, go to 3 pages, the ways to communicate section, because that really lands with people. This is how I like to be communicated with. Ways not to communicate definitely lands too, because that's all about them reflecting on times when the communication hasn't been great. And then value to the team, we like to end on that, because it's a real boost to their confidence. So those will be the kind of pages that we would say, have a read of them here and now, to help them with, acknowledging and accepting that profile and building the credibility of it. And then you can, from there, you can then, if you want to, you can sort of say, right, we're going to follow up, or, have a read of the rest of the pages in your own time, or work through them with your leader, whatever that might be. So then we move on to the values and perceptions exercise, which is my favorite thing to do with a group. I absolutely love this. And the way that it works is you ask people, and we've got you can print out the these words essentially and put them on the floor. Get people to look at their profile, and let's say we're going to do the D scale. So reminder, problem, how you handle problems and challenges. And we'll say, if you're above the line on D, we want you to go and work at this flip chart. If you are below the line on D, we want you to go and work at this flip chart. So you've got the high Ds and the low Ds working at separate flip charts. Or an iPad. A flip chart makes me sound really old now, doesn't it? So go to one side there, high D and low D working as groups. And then we're going to ask the high Ds, what value does the low D, so the opposite to them, bring to the team and bring to the organization? Okay. And then we're going to ask the low Ds, what value does the high D bring to the team and the organization? And then if you want to, you can add something to that, which is, how do you think your behavior, so the high D behavior, is perceived by the low Ds and vice versa? And what happens is, when they then present this back to the group, bearing in mind they work together and they're polar opposites, high Ds and low Ds in terms of that scale, what happens is something really nice, which is where the high Ds are telling the low Ds how valuable they are, how valuable their behavior is. And equally, the low Ds are telling the high Ds how valuable their behavior is. And this is something that they may have had some form of conflict, or I like to say behavioral friction on and with in the past. And, suddenly the high Ds are saying, well, they really think things through, and, they don't just jump into things, and they're kind of a bit more strategic with decisions that they make. And the low Ds are going, oh, wow, that's the first time I've ever heard that person, speaking so favorably of something that I thought they didn't appreciate in me at all, because I always thought that they'd think I was a stick in the mud, or, whatever. And equally, you've got the low Ds saying, well, they are really, driven, and they push us forward, and they take risks that sometimes we do need to take. And, otherwise it might take us a long time to make a decision. And again, the high Ds are going, wow, okay, you actually think that's good, that's great. And you can literally see before your eyes all these light bulbs going on, and it really just brings everything that you've talked about up. And I love, and then what you can do then when you've done that, you can collate. I love that. I think it's really good to collate the information that everybody's saying and then send that back to the team so that they can remember that. It will help you as well with your action plans at the end of the session. But then what you'd do is then you'd say, if you've got time, this is, because you could just pick a couple. But if you've got the time, you can then say, right, now let's move on to the I. So what happens then is everyone that's above the I and works together, and everyone that's below the line on the I work together. And so they're in different groups then. And that exercise is really, really good. It really lands, and everybody gives great feedback on it. So I would definitely recommend that you do that. And then the next element is then to look at the team wheel. So this is an example of what a team wheel might look like here. And we get them in groups to talk about, so what insights can we gain from looking at this team? Put it back to them. Don't just tell them this is what it's shown us. Let them look at it, because that's really where we find that most of the learning comes from. But give them some hints, because that's quite a big thing. So are there any overpopulations in our team? Are there any underrepresentations in our team? Do people adapt into those particular areas? And I have to say that when you work with a senior leadership team, they really, really excel at this, and really particularly love this, because you're asking them to look really strategically at the behaviors in that team. Is there a trend of adaptation? Are there any potential areas of friction? And that's where you would end day one. So again, they feed that back to the group, and that's where you would then say, great. That's the end of day one. Final thoughts and questions, and thank them for their participation and their active engagement. And then, of course, the next day, day two, we've got a quick recap. So, just quickly recap what we talked about yesterday with the behaviors. This is the best slide for doing that, because again, it just drives home. It's about problems and challenges, etc. I'm sure people are fed up of me saying that, because I see it all the time. Introduction to driving forces. I love the analogy of the glasses for driving forces, because when you really understand what driving forces are, it is essentially like putting on, when you start to practice this, it is putting on a pair of glasses so that you see the world through completely different eyes, which is quite a challenging thing for people to do, actually, at first, until you practice it. But that's the thing that I love. You can, if you want to now, absolutely do not suggest that you ask people these questions. These are questions that are designed to make people feel something. So I just get them on the screen and kind of get people to look at them, to really try and, because people will look at these and they'll almost feel themselves, I can't not say, what I think about this particular area. And I want people to experience that, because that's what the difference between behaviors. This is really, really deep down and really important to people. And we excuse me, we tell people that driving forces shows us that unique why we do things, and it comes from our values, and clusters of beliefs with similar underlying patterns and ideas that we believe to be unquestionably true and fundamentally important. So that's the amount of detail that I would sort of give on that, but use these questions to make people feel something rising in their chest, because certain questions on here do that for me, and I think that really helps to promote your point. I mean, as I'm saying that, you're probably all thinking, oh, I really want to actually say something about this, and that's what you want people to experience in your session, so they understand just how important it is and just how deep rooted that is. Then we talk about the scales. So, everyone understands theoretical, utilitarian, aesthetic scales. And the reason we break these up into 6, because we know there's 12, is that it just helps to describe both sides of that scale. So then you introduce what the graph looks like with the 6 scales and the 12 driving forces on either side of those scales. And then I just give a little bit more detail about what they are. We all, I don't need to do that to you guys, because you know that, but instinctive versus intellectual. And I explain about, the fact that it's the knowledge scale, but it's valued in different ways. Then you've got your descriptors of what each of those mean. So you can take them through the different driving forces, 12 of them. Make sure you've got these pages as workbook pages as well. So you'll see we've got the workbook session, but they'll need to refer back to them. And then give an overview of primary, situational, and indifferent. So they understand what primary driving forces clusters are, situational and indifferent, with a particular attention to the primary driving forces cluster, because of course we know that's what gives them the purpose, and that's what drives them forward. At that point, they receive their driving forces profile, and they read through the driving characteristics. Again, same methodology, true, false edit. Go to the energizers and stressors pages, because again, they just really land there and then with people, and they're quick for them to read. And then go to the primary driving forces cluster. And at this stage, I absolutely love this exercise, and there's 2 options here for you. The first one, I feel is better suited, but again, it's a judgment call from you, but I feel is better suited to more senior positions. So if you're working with an SLT, I think this is really good, because it keeps them thinking quite strategically, and they seem to be quite engaged in this. And that exercise is all about exploring how their personal driving forces, in particular their primary driving forces cluster, how they fit into the company's mission statement or vision and values, and to get them to explore together about their personal whys and the organizational whys. It's a really great exercise. But the other exercise that you could try would be the second option here, which is, I call it the wear the glasses exercise. And you can get from Amazon or wherever like a big pair of glasses. Don't get the ones with the nose, because that just puts people off, but but the big glasses, and you can give them a scenario. So they're going to work in groups, and you can either give them all the same scenario, or you can give them different scenarios. One that I like to use would be, there's a pub that dates back to the 18th century in the center of a village, and it's being flattened. They're going to feel straight away a certain way about that. Certain driving forces will think, oh, I don't like that, or it's going to touch something for them. Other people doesn't bother them. Again, that all relates to their personal driving forces. But what we do there is we say, right, now we want you to put the glasses on, and on the card in front of you, we want you to see that scenario through the lenses of that driving force. And we want you to report back to the group on how you feel about this scenario. And equally, what you would like it to become moving forward. And that really opens that up about, if it's not going to be a pub and we're going to destroy all this history, that's one of mine coming out in what I've just said to you. But if we're going to do that, what does it need to be moving forward? And then explain your reasoning. And you do this through the lenses of the driving force that they have on the card in front of them. And the reason I love that is that it really gets people into that difference between their own driving force and actually the glasses that they're wearing. And because that's a really nice element to the conversation of, how did that actually feel when you were saying these things that you actually don't believe yourself? And people find that very challenging. So again, it just really drives home the fact that we all see the world through these different driving forces, and how much deeper rooted it is than behavioral friction when you have conflict with somebody. So if they're driving, so the key there is to understand the driving forces of people, if you can, and get them to make sure the card in front of them is quite different, if you can, to their own, to the driving forces that of the group, because that's going to make that exercise really come alive. So I love that. And in practice, it works really, really well, and just really helps people to understand how deep rooted it is. So then you can introduce the driving forces wheel in here. So explain about how the driving forces wheel works. And then you can then actually present the team. So the team that you're working with, this is their driving forces. And the reason I've got two different ones up here is just because, as you'll probably know, when you're creating the driving forces wheels, or there's a couple of different options. You've got the this particular option where you can see the percentages of the team, or you've got this option where you've got the primary driving forces plotted on there. So I just wanted to highlight that, just in case anyone's used to using this one, for example, and is seeing that one for the first time. It's a couple of different options that you can use. I personally love this one because I just feel like it gives a real quick snapshot into where the populations are really easily. So get the team up there, and again, get them to work in a group and look at the team in this kind of strategic way. Is there a culture? What are they? What's coming out in the wheels? What can they see as a group? Are there any overpopulations or underrepresentations? How does the organisation reward and champion, these? And is there a bit of a gap there even? And where might potential areas of conflict come up between these team members? So get them to do that. And then this is where I would then bring the two together and just really help people understand that behaviours is the how and the driving forces is the why you do something. And an exercise that can work to help people differentiate between the two, if you feel that they need to, would be to write an introductory paragraph to someone that you don't know about yourself, and using the your primary driving forces cluster and your behaviors in terms of the why and the how. So this is how you do something, this is what people might see in your behaviors, and this is the reason why. Why do you do that? So you can use your report to help you. And then this is the point where I would maybe even get them to, if you're using a Talent Insights Management Staff report, you'll have the behavioural and motivational sections that combines the two sciences together. So that's a really great time to get them to look at that particular section. So at this point of the session, they have a really good understanding of behaviours and of DISC and their team and what those behaviours look like. They have a really good understanding of driving forces in general and them as a team and what that looks like as a team. Now we move into and what are we going to do about it? So these are all workshops that they're going to work on together, based upon all of the stuff that you've prepped them for. So the first one is all about enhancing communication. So they're going to work in groups based upon what we've learned so far about the team. what communication strategies could we implement as a team? So we're going to get them to think about the cultures of the team, where there's any differences in the overpopulations or the underrepresentations, and what they've learned, and think about things that they could change or things that they could do better as a team moving forward. So we're getting them to identify that. It might be something as simple as when we have team meetings, because we've got 90% of the team have high I behavior or something. I once worked with a PR team who, basically everyone had a high I behavior, and maybe that's about being really strict with timings, because the meeting starts at 2:30. If we want to catch up about things, we'll start the meeting at 20 past, but then the actual business element of it starts at 30:30. So it can be real. I find the more specific, the better, actually, that they can come up with different ways based upon what they've learned to enhance that communication. Then the next element of that is conflict resolution and problem solving. So here we're going to ask them to work in groups. And we're going to say, based upon what we've learned so far about the team, what common sources of conflict might occur within the team. So again, looking at driving forces in particular, and behaviours as well. What can we see any themes here? And what techniques could we implement if this occurs? How could we actually turn that into an opportunity? So again, get them to really think about some strategies moving forward. This information, by the way, for conflict resolution and also for enhancing communication needs to be collated by either you, or you need to have somebody there that's writing all this down so you can follow up with a really great document, an action plan for the team. And then this is where I would talk a little bit about trust and psychological safety, helping people understand the importance of that, of people feeling psychological safe within their teams, and have an open discussion on some strategies that you could take based upon what we've learned that will help people feel that they're in a safe environment and that we can trust each other as a team. And then the final element of this is action planning. And I would do this as an open conversation, because I always feel that it ends better, the session ends better if it's an open conversation. So based upon what we've learned about the how and the why of the team members, and understanding the importance of psychological safety, and also the importance of good communication and problem solving, even if they just have five solid actions that we can decide as a team that we're going to take and we'll be prepared to follow up on, and every single team meeting maybe, or if we can book some elements into the diary that we're going to be prepared to follow up on. It could be 5, it could be 10, whatever you feel comfortable with, and again, it's going to be different from team to team, but really try and get some solid things that everybody agrees to that we're going to take moving forward and that we'll follow up on. And then what can we do to ensure that those actions remain a priority for us as a team, and that we're consistent with. And again, that needs to be collated and then sent on to everybody at the end. And then the next element would be closing and reflection. So it's really important always that you end with quite a large section of it being about, and what do we do with this information? Because if you don't, you'll have the situation where everyone comes onto the session and thinks, wow, this was really great, I learned so much, and this totally, and look, I remember the first time I took a profile ever, and my mind was blown, and I just thought, wow. But then what normally happens is people go, that was amazing. Anyway, back to real life. So if you don't build in the conversations and workshops and all of it around what do we do with this information, you will have delivered an amazing session, and people will genuinely have, totally different perspective on themselves and of other people, personal and professionally, but it won't land, and there won't be, you won't have changed anything essentially for the team. So it's really important that you do that and follow up with the action plan document if you can. There are a few other things that we'd suggest. Some additional notes. Leave in with the leader of the team a team behavioural report and a driving forces behavioural report. They're absolutely amazing, interactive, really professional tools that are going to help people. It's almost like a manual for a leader, for their team moving forward. It's a really good way to follow up and to move forward to the next step. The tool that we kind of recommend using for this program is the Talent Insights Management Staff Report, but I would recommend that you split the report. So because otherwise, if you give them the Talent Insights report at the beginning of day one, when you're talking about behaviours, then of course they will be able to see ahead and they'll be able to read ahead that evening. So split the report so that they see the behaviours first and then the driving forces during day two. It is best practice if you can follow up with individual coaching debriefs. That's the gold standard. That would definitely be, something that I would recommend and encourage you to, to put in to the program. Some people even do those prior, which works really well as well. But of course, then when they get their profile, it's not a surprise. But that's fine. That it works really well as well. But if you can follow up with coaching debriefs, that is, it really is the gold standard. We mentioned about the joining instructions at the beginning. Make sure that they are really good, because it really helps to leverage the session. It really helps to make the session run well and for people to feel really comfortable. And consider the behaviors and the driving forces of your team members. We need to practice what we preach. If you, for example, have a lot of people who have intellectual drivers in your team, and of course you can see them because their profiles have been completed prior, I would definitely recommend printing off a copy of the technical report that you can access via the research site. So definitely print that off and take that with you, because they might not read it. It's more than 300 pages long, so they're probably not going to read it. But just the fact that you can drop it on the table and it makes a massive thud, makes people realize that this has got some real substance to it. They'll be looking for that information. So look at your at the profiles of your delegates beforehand and consider what they might be asking for or what information you can provide them with. Obviously, look for your unusual graph pattern shapes. I'm sure PORIG does too, but we really drill into people. Do not fall into the trap of having all your profiles printed off and being in the session, giving them out, and that's the first time you've actually looked at them. You might feel really confident in your abilities to deliver a session like that, but trust me, you'll get tripped up and it will be really embarrassing if you do have a tight pattern shape and someone says, "Excuse me, my wheel says non-placeable. What does that mean?" And you just think, "Oh no." So, really make sure it's not the first time you've seen them. And then, of course, really importantly, there's a workbook that accompanies this, and you need that because especially when they're doing some of those exercises, they're a bit more advanced at the end of day two, they're going to need to reflect back on the behavioral scales. They're going to need to reflect back on the driving forces scales and what each of those assessments and sciences are telling us. So you need to make sure they've got that so that when they're working through these exercises, the values and perceptions one, for example, they can check back. So make sure you've got that available to give to them. While I just collate, is there anything that you want to add to what I've said?
Well, first I'd like to thank you, Sarah. That was comprehensive, to say the least, and actually a really good presentation. So thank you very much, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I haven't, for the benefit of it, I hadn't seen this, my first time seeing this presentation from Sarah. So thank you. A couple of quick comments just while you're thinking, Sarah. Exercises, Sarah's got lots of exercise in there. And even if you're doing a 3-hour workshop as opposed to a 2-day workshop, the more exercises, the better. I can't overemphasize that in all the trainings. Adults learn by doing. I think what we are measuring, the way you kept going back to the how do we deal with problems and challenges? How do we deal with contact people and context, pace, consistency, procedure, constraint? Going back to that and being very, very precise about what we're measuring, I think is really, really important in the learning for them when you're doing the DISC and driving force, behaviors and driving force, differentiation between the how and the why, and getting to really get their head around this. I thought your point about there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad, that's critical. And people really need to understand it. And when you start the value I bring to the value people are bringing to the team, that's perhaps the single most important thing I think that you can do in the training. Because people really come to understand that everybody's different, but everybody brings value. We all have different value that we bring to the team. And understand and getting people to articulate the way you were doing it, where people describe their opposite in a positive way, I think is a really, really interesting exercise. I hadn't seen that before, Sarah. That's one I would definitely add to my little list. I think that the team culture profile, I really like the matrices in the team report, and I tend to use those instead of the wheels. When I get to the end, I want to know what's the team culture, who are the outliers. I find the matrices in the team report to be very, very helpful. And one other thing I do that I like is driving force statements. I think it's really interesting to try and get people to write their driving force statement. I think that's really, really useful. And the last thing, just a comment on Carl Ann's question about the length of the day. I like 45-minute chunks. And have decent breaks in between, allow people toilet breaks, coffee breaks, and so on, allow them periods of reflection. And I like to recap every time I come back to the next 45 minutes. Okay, what did we cover in the first 45 minutes? Recap that, then move on to the next step. I find from an adult learning perspective, that's really helpful.